Good morning. I expect you've noticed from other channels that Watchtower has raised the question, are you doing your best? In other words, can you do more? And they base their viewpoint on Galatians 6 and verse 4, where it says in the New World Translation, let each one prove what his own work is, and then he will have cause for exultation in regard to himself alone. Now, I know from your emails and comments that many of you were pushed beyond what you could really be doing and have suffered illness as a consequence. So let's look at Galatians 6:4 and see what is it really teaching. Now, we know from the book of Jude that we need to put up a hard fight for the faith. So what is that faith? Well, if we look in Galatians 2 and verse 16, Paul said, we acknowledge that what makes a man righteous is not obedience to the law, but faith in Christ Jesus. He holds that faith in Christ, rather than fidelity to the law, is what justifies us. No one can be justified by keeping the law. We might add, no one can be justified by works. It's our faith. Now, we know that every Christian will engage in works. Our faith and our love for our fellow man will cause us to help those in need, and we will, out of our hearts, talk about the good news. So, what I want to do for a moment is look at Galatians 6:4 from the works of Barnes. I'll just leave that there a minute. You can read it if you want to stop the video. He states this on, let every man prove his own work, and then he shall have rejoicing in himself alone. He states, the man who examines himself and who forms no extravagant expectation in regard to what is due to himself, or I might add, no extravagant expectation with regard to what you can do, then you will be happy. We will find in ourselves a source of joy. Now, Barnes quotes from Proverbs 14 verse 14, which states that a good man shall be satisfied from himself. And he states that in an approving conscience, in other words, if our conscience approves what we're doing, in the evidence of favor of God, in an honest effort to lead a pure and holy life, he will have happiness. The source of his joys will be within. We won't be dependent on what other people think or what Watchtower tells us we should be doing. Now, how can we develop this inner happiness, this satisfaction with what we're doing ourselves, and not be pushed beyond our endurance by any comments from others? Well, let's look at what Paul did. Now, we know that Paul received a revelation on the road to Damascus, and it states this, that in Galatians chapter 1 verse 11 and 12, he said, the good news I preached is not a human message that I was given by men. It's something I learned only through a revelation by Jesus Christ. Now, the minute he got this revelation, he said in verse 16 and 17, I did not stop to discuss this with any human being. I didn't go up to Jerusalem, but he went straight off into Arabia. Now, why did he do that? Well, Paul knew the law and the prophets really well, but he was looking at them from the wrong perspective. He was thinking that the law was an end in itself, but he had to realize that the law was simply a tutor leading to Jesus Christ. And once Jesus Christ arrived, once the faith arrived, the law wasn't needed anymore. We now had the law of the Christ. But he had to get his head around this. And once he did, he started preaching, and he went back to Damascus. Now, after 3 years, he went up to Jerusalem to visit Peter and stayed with him for a couple of weeks. But he didn't meet with any of the other apostles. The good news was in him. He didn't need any man to explain it to him or to dictate what he was going to do. So he went preaching, and after 14 years, he then went up to Jerusalem. And by this time he had Barnabas and Titus with him, and Titus was a Gentile. Paul was satisfied within himself that he had the good news, and he preached according to what he was happy with. Now, we can do the same. So Galatians 6 and verse 4 is asking us to look at ourselves, not with a critical eye, but with a trying to find a source of rejoicing. Be happy with what you're doing. Be happy with your faith in Jesus. Now, if we want to do more, then let us read the Galatians as coming direct from God to Paul to us. We might need some explanation in the way of commentaries to help us understand, but let us read it then for ourselves, be satisfied within ourselves that we have the faith, that we are pleasing God. So I do hope that that helps a little bit and helps us to be happy with what we're doing and not trying to push and try to do more. Works will not get us approved by God. Faith will. But thank you for watching this morning.